Hello everyone and welcome back to Football Manager 2018 and the final part of this experiment where we try to bankrupt the Premier League. You can see when we left off last time, Fulham had become the title holders, but City were currently top of the league and looking to win another trophy. The goal of this essentially had become to bankrupt the entire Premier League and turn it on its head. We did that for most Premier League teams. You can see there are very few of them left. But almost all of the big teams are still up there. Chelsea and Liverpool have gone down, and some of you guys noticed that Spurs are actually in 6th place in League 2. They have fallen a long way from grace, and you can see consecutive relegations getting them down into League 2. And they've really been struggling after going into administration quite some time ago. They just haven't been able to pick themselves up despite the new owners coming in. So what I'm going to do today is use a strategy that some of you thought about in the comments, which I hadn't thought about when it comes to bankrupting a team. And we're not going to spend too much time on this. I'm just going to pick out Man City, who are really the arch nemesis of this experiment, because whatever we do, they always bounce back. They had titles here, recovering from 14th to come and win the title. They won it again, dropped down to 4th, had a bit of stagnation down to 6th, won it again, dropped down again, and came back once more. They always bounce back no matter what you do. So what I'm going to do is try to bankrupt them in a slightly different way. I'm not going to mess with the editor in terms of their finances. I'm going to mess with the editor and their players. So I'm going to give a few players contracts for the maximum wage allowed. So if we start editing their club contract details, we're going to put this up to the maximum of 575 grand a week. But we're also going to add in another clause where we are going to, if I can find the right clause, so we're going to give them a yearly wage rise of 100%, which means after 5 years, or after the first year, their wage will go to $1 million a week, then $2 million a week, then $4 million a week, and should finish up at about $8 million a week or $16 million a week, depending on when they get their wage increase. So in theory, you're going to have every player on 16 or up to 16 million a week, because I'm also going to go through and give the majority of the first team players a match highest earner clause, which means that they should all be earning a huge amount of money as well. So that is the only way I can think of to bankrupt the team, because they will be losing tens of millions a week, which surely the game will not be able to fix. So let's go forward now. We'll go forward a couple of years so that the wages have doubled twice, and see what the playing situation is of Manchester City, who at the moment are first in the Premier League. Well, we are a couple of years into the future. It's December 2030, and you can see a beautiful drop down in City's form. They finished second despite those high wages, but they then finished 16th and are still 16th in the Premier League as of right now. If we have a look at their senior squad, though, you can see they don't have any players. They've all pretty much dropped out of the senior squad. And if we look at their under-23s, there's nobody here either. They've had to release so many players, but it doesn't fix everything. You can see they've got a couple of players left here as hot prospects, but down at the bottom end, they've still got 4 players who are now on £4.6 million a week, which is absolutely crazy. That's how much is that over a year? That's nearly $500 million every year that these players are picking up in wages. So it's going to take $2 billion out of the club having these 4 players on this much money. And if we look at the club details and their finances, they've still got a load of cash in here. The club is not yet stopping with its silly way of managing the bank balance, but their wage budget is totally out of control. 5.5 million a week is their wage budget. Nearly one player takes up that budget, so they're exceeding it by about 15 million a week, which is just not sustainable, and those wages are going to double every single year. I'm not sure how they managed to get rid of a lot of the other players, because I did extend several players' contract to 5 years, so somehow they've managed to get rid of them. If we look at the transfer history for this season, there is no transfer history. They've had players go out the year before. Thomas Newton going to Bristol City, his wage is just 81 grand a week, and the year before that, lots of players going out on loan as they try and fix their situation. Steve Flynn going to Fulham, he's on 240 grand a week now. Mark Muyanze, 59 grand a week. But those high wages seem to have just disappeared in the game. And you can see the year before that they did spend money, but they've now been unable to sign a player for 3 years because their wage budget is so taken up with players, one of which is a backup player on 4.6 million a week. So this seems to be working. It's whether it will sustain over the long term and see them finally drop out the leagues, because you can see they've still got 300 odd million in the bank and their owners keep on pushing money into the club. So let's go forward another couple of years and see if they have finally been relegated and if we finally had some success with them. Well, as you can see, a couple of years later, they were finally relegated. After finishing 16th, they are then down in 20th place, but they're currently first in the Championship, which is a little bit disappointing because it means they have managed to bounce back. But if we look at their senior squad, they do have a lot more players in the club, most of them in on loan though, which is interesting. But if we filter them by wage, they've still got 3 players on £9.2 million a week, which is just crazy. I don't know how they can sustain that. 10 million a week is literally £500 million per player, so that's 1.5 billion in wages every year in the Championship. And you can see their finances have finally been impacted, which is crazy. They're 231 million in the negative, and that's without me touching their finances at all. If we look at their landmarks, you can see they've scrapped their youth facilities a couple of times now and sold them on, despite upgrading them for no reason whatsoever. Failed the club Champions League financial fair play, went out and into and out of administration 2 years ago. So they are finally suffering for their mass indulgence in breaking the game and their finances. We have figured out a way to completely do them over. But they're still, at the moment, heading towards the Premier League once more. It's April 2032, and at the moment they are top of the Championship, which is a little bit strange, really, with so many players in on loan. They are managing to keep up their position at the top, 7 points clear at the top, so they will be returning to the Premier League almost certainly with an 11-point gap over the playoffs. So what I'm going to do now is go forward about 5-6 years and just see what we can do. I'm going to try and put up some of the wages of some of the other players to make sure we do break their finances. But it is going to be difficult. But hopefully they will have fallen a couple more leagues and have a completely new financial setup so that they can't just pump in this money all of the time. So let's go forward again 5 or 6 years and see if we have finally managed to break the unbreakable Manchester City. Well, we are now 6 years into the future, and you can see City have totally flatlined. They've hit 20th in the Premier League after winning promotion in first place, and they've then gone 24, 24, 24, 24th on 5 consecutive relegations, all the way down to the Vanarama National League North, which is where they are at the moment, with just a regional reputation and insecure finances. And that is a position we wanted to get them into. After so many years of trying, we've pushed this game forward about 20 years now, and it's taken that long to finally defeat a club like Manchester City, getting them to plummet right to the bottom of the football pyramid, or at least in the game, the football pyramid. The annoying thing is we did go a little bit too far, so we can't see how high the wages of those players got, because I turned off the autosave to make sure we progressed as quickly as possible. But if we try and find one of the players who was on nearly 10 million a week when we left off, I imagine it's this guy here, Diogo from Shangang. He's on 190 grand a week at the moment. No, it wasn't him. It was actually this guy who left Manchester City on probably, if I had to guess, 20, 40, 80. He must have been on 160 million a week when he finally left Manchester City. Although he actually left them when they were still in the Premier League, so somehow they managed to get rid of him despite me extending his contract. They must have just let him go on a free, and he then went to Sheffield Wednesday before going on to Brazil. So God knows how much Sheffield Wednesday were playing him, but it cannot be more than 500 grand a week, no matter what, because the game will not let you go any higher than that. So he took a big wage cut to move to a different club, which is quite interesting that the game allows the players to let their wage fall so far. But ultimately, it's destroyed Manchester City as a club, and they've fallen right down the league. If we look at their club details, their reputation's still around where it was, but their finances are still in the negative. And 1.3 million is a huge deficit to have in this league, and they don't seem to have any way of coming back. They had their new owners coming in 2035, so 3 years ago, when they would have probably been in League One, and they've just not been able to stop the fall, and ultimately it sent them all the way down to to the non-league football with administration as well. They were in administration at the start of this season. They finally managed to come out of it. They actually went into it. They were in administration for 2 years, unable to get out of it. So they must have had enormous debts, which they've now settled to allow themselves to stabilise in non-league football. And they are doing reasonably well in 6th place in non-league. But ultimately, we succeeded in our goal. I was desperate to get one of the big financial superpowers, and Manchester City are just the biggest. And I just wanted to get them to fall down, because again, we're just giving them billions and billions and billions of cash with no explanation. And ultimately, we did finally manage to break the game and get Manchester City all the way down to the bottom tier in the game. So some success there, at least. I'm not sure how the rest of the league looks. If we go up to the National League and see if there are any Premier League teams or former Premier League teams in the National League, then we can see, is there anybody in there? Quick look, not anybody that I can see. So no other Premier League team are in non-league football. In League 2, again, can't really see anybody there. There are no Premier League teams in League 2. In League 1, you can see this is where you find the teams. Everton down here, West Ham down here, Bournemouth. All the teams that had fallen into League 1, they have bottomed out as not League 1 teams, but most of them in the Championship. Spurs and Chelsea fighting for promotion in the Championship. And then in the Premier League, who are the current champions? It's Arsenal who are leading the title, but Fulham have established themselves as one of the Premier League teams, winning the title several times and finishing runner-up in the other seasons. So we have turned football on its head eventually. It's taken a very, very long time, and Arsenal, the Premier League team, to really benefit from all of this. I can't imagine there have been any English Champions League winners, but we will have a little look at the past winners of this competition just to make sure. But there are no Premier League teams anywhere near this, and there haven't been since 1920 season, when Manchester United lost to Barcelona. So we have destroyed English football. We've destroyed all of the English teams as well, which is great stuff. So if you're satisfied with the end of this experiment, do drop a like on the video. Make sure to subscribe as well. There will be a new experiment out in a couple of days' time. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter. You can also support me on Patreon using the links in the description. But until next time, see ya.